when we chant the verse at the beginning of taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, we're really getting our mind very clear about, first of all, what path we're following, and second, why we're following that path. So when we take refuge, we're really saying, I know what my path is, I know who my guide is, I know what the Dharma friends who are supporting me are. This is the direction I'm going in. And this is my worldview. And so then we can be very clear about what we're doing instead of vacillating and being confused about, well, what path do I follow and what do I really believe and so on. And then generating bodhicitta, why are we following this path? It's not just for our own benefit. Yeah, we're in this to be of the greatest benefit to all living beings. So it's a simple verse that we recite many times every day. But actually, when you think about it, it has great meaning, because you could do many meditations on who is the Buddha, what's the Dharma, who is the Sangha, why are they valid or reliable refuges, how to relate to them, and so on. And then, of course, how to generate bodhicitta. So it's kind of like a very abbreviated Lamrim teaching, that verse. Because especially when you take refuge in the Dharma, you're taking refuge in the realizations of all the teachings. So they're all there in the Dharma refuge. So with that kind of clarity in our mind as to what path we're following and why we're following it, then let's learn what is not only the basis of the path, but is found throughout the entire path, and that is ethical conduct. So really, when you think about it very deeply, that verse has so much in it. Yeah? And different parts of the verse may speak more strongly to us at one time or another. Sometimes it may be refuge, sometimes bodhicitta. But regarding taking refuge, it's not, they often describe it at the beginning like you need safety and protection. So the analogy is how a child runs to their mother who offers safety and protection. That's, when they usually explain it in the Lamrim, that's the initial example that they give. But I think taking refuge is much more than that. It's really a clarity about what we believe, yeah, and what our worldview is. How do we look at life? Yeah, because it's really saying, the Buddha's my guide, the Dharma is the path I'm following, the Sangha are the people who are helping me. And to know that, we have to know, well, how do we conceive of things? What's this world around us like? So they often say that all religions have their own version of the Four Truths. What is suffering, what is its origin, what's the cessation, and what's the path. So if you look at theistic religions, suffering is, having, it's still, I think, it's not, I don't think they would say it's birth. They would say it's aging, sickness, and death. Yeah. Buddhists always had birth, because once you have birth, you have the other three. And the origin, in theistic religions, the origin is, you're separate from from God. You haven't followed God's instructions. You haven't followed the Ten Commandments. Yeah, and in terms of the path and the cessation, the cessation of that suffering looks like rebirth in heaven, but it's, the notion of heaven is you're reunited with all your relatives. Is that the cessation of suffering? Being reunited with all your relatives? Having everything that you had here on this plane being reproduced, except the environment is nicer. Is that the real cessation of happiness, or cessation of suffering? Is that the final goal? You want to live in everlasting peace and happiness with all your relatives forever? Yeah. I don't know about you, but that it doesn't get me fired up about practicing anything. Yeah. And then the path to that heaven is to somehow follow God's will or God's wishes, but it's not always clear what God's wishes and God's will are. It's kind of, maybe you have the Ten Commandments, but when it gets into other things, how do you who makes the decision as to what is virtuous and what isn't? So then we have religious institutions that are created by human beings, but are said to have divine people who have a divine connection in them. So the Pope, has some kind of connection with God, and then things can change quite radically according to what the Pope says. The same in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's a what? A prophet, yeah. And then the leader, I don't know what his title is, but he can change things because he has divine inspiration. Yeah. And then, in some evangelical Christian churches, again, somebody in it has some connection with God. And so that seems relying on that person who you have to have great faith in to tell you what the path is to follow, because not all the particulars of the path are laid out. Yeah. And then it can change, and then we see from one church to the other it changes. And then, then it gets really confusing when you have things like in the Catholic Church with all the scandals that are happening. Then who did, what is virtue and what is non-virtue? If you trust the bishops, but they're doing a big cover-up, then do they really have the divine inspiration? Do you follow them? It gets quite confusing. I think in Buddhism it's much clearer, because we have the Dharma Refuge, we have the teachings that the Buddha laid out, and we follow those teachings, and we always come back to those teachings. And there's some times where people may have different views on things or different opinions or whatever, and when you get into some stages of the path, like in Tantra, people have their subtle energy systems may be different, so there may be some differences in how you practice there. But in general, like His Holiness says, you always come back to the basic Buddhist teachings, which are very clear, what they are. And so we have that worldview. It's up to us to decide if we believe it, there's no threat of we're going to hell if we don't agree with it, or if we have other ideas. Buddhism is much more open about, here are the teachings, and then you see if they fit you, and if they help you, and if they make sense to you. And if they don't, that's okay. There's no threats of hell in there. Although His Holiness loves telling the story of one monk who went to see one Lama, and the Lama was out that day in the village, and so that monk asked the Lama's attendant, what is he doing in the village? And the attendant said, scaring the lay people, because he was apparently teaching all about the hell realms and hungry ghost realms, and scaring everybody in order to be good. But that's not really what Buddhism is about, and that's not the right approach, and that's not the way we should understand those teachings on the different realms. Anyway, when we have a clear idea about our worldview and what we believe in, and what is dukkha, what is its origin, can it be ceased, how do we cease it, what's that final state, then things become much clearer for us. We can be much more grounded. Whereas when it's not very clear about what exactly you practice, then it gets rather cloudy. So, where we are here in going through some of these verses, we're at the stage now where the person is going to shave their head and put on robes, which is called Rabjung. Okay, that's what Rabjung is. And then if they haven't taken the 5 lay precepts yet, they take them at this point, and so you give refuge in the 5 lay precepts. Or if people have taken the 5 lay precepts already, then you go directly into the Shramanera precepts and take those. But that verse 2 focuses on taking refuge in the 3 jewels. Okay? So, today we're starting out with chanting. Our chant master is in Canada today. So, So we did the verse of how wonderful, great, courageous one yesterday. And so since we're going to be talking about refuge, then the next verse says, take refuge in the world-honored ones. World-honored ones is a translation from the Chinese of the word Bhagawan. Okay? The Tibetans often translate it as endowed transcendent destroyer, which is a long kind of confusing term, but if you know what each word means, then it makes a lot of sense. So take refuge in the great world-honored ones who are able to cross over the suffering or the dukkha of existence in the 3 realms. May all sentient beings entirely enter the bliss of nirvana. So again, here we are preparing to take pratimoksha precepts, which the minimum motivation should be renunciation. But again, this ceremony is imbued with bodhicitta. May all sentient beings entirely enter the bliss of nirvana. Okay, we're on the bottom of page 15, if you're wondering. Okay, and so also here we're thinking, the 3 jewels who are able to cross over the dukkha of existence in the 3 worlds, in the 3 realms, okay? So the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realms. We may say, well, the form and formless realms sound pretty peaceful. Yeah, you don't have to pay taxes. You don't get parking tickets. Um, you don't have governmental elections. There's no Russian interference. So it sounds pretty good. But as long as we are still under the influence of afflictions and karma, uh, whatever happiness you experience there, when the karma for that runs out, then you go back down to lower, the realms with greater apparent suffering. Okay? Here it's important because it says here sufferings of cyclic existence. I usually use the term dukkha because when we hear suffering, we think of physical pain or mental pain. And then when we think of compassion, we think of having compassion, for people who are sick and so on. And which is good. We need that kind of compassion. We need the renunciation of that level of suffering. But, dukkha in the Buddhist sense goes way beyond physical suffering. Yeah. And so the cessation of dukkha isn't just about, having a healthy body, living in heaven with your relatives. It's getting out from under the influence of afflictions and karma. Because as long as there's afflictions and karma, we're going to get this kind of body. Yeah. And as soon as we have this kind of body, we're going to get sick, we're going to get old, we're going to die. Yeah. And in between all of those things, all the problems that we don't want, they come to us. Yeah, we can't get what we want. We try very hard, but we can't fulfill all of our wishes. And then sometimes when we do, we're disappointed and let down by what we get. Yeah. So in Buddhism, it's not just the ouch suffering. That's bad enough. But it's the dukkha of, the changeable dukkha, that whatever we crave that we think is going to, make us feel good, that is not going to last. Yeah? So we work so hard to get these things that we think, the eight worldly concerns, the money and possessions, the praise and approval, the good reputation, the nice physical, sensual sensations. We work so hard to get those things. But how long does that happiness last? And if we keep on doing that same thing, do we get happier and happier? Or at a certain point, it's like, get me out of here. I've had enough. Yeah? So they always give the example of eating. That one's easy to see. When you first start eating, the suffering of hunger goes down, and and so that's called the happiness of being full. But after a while, then the suffering of being full becomes more prominent, and then you feel sick to your stomach. So we all understand that. We say, yeah, that's true. But we have to look more deeply in our lives about the kind of dukkha of change that we hang on to, And so look at the things that you're really attached to. Maybe friends and relatives, maybe romantic partners, yeah? Look at that and how, you feel, if I'm with these people, these people, being with these people, I feel so good. I feel like I belong and they understand me. And then, of course, when you fall in love, you're like over the top. And, this person, nobody else is as wonderful as this person. And I want to be with them all the time. And we're going to live happily ever after, like they promised in the fairy tales. Yeah, remember? Yeah. And we all read those fairy tales, didn't we? We were all they put that stuff in our mind when we were little kids. Yeah? That there's a way where you can live happily ever after. Yeah? But of course we look around, and who lives happily ever after? Yeah? Among your friends and your family, do you see anybody who does? No? With the people that you care about the most, that you feel the most secure and close to, do you want to be with them 24/7 for a week even? Yeah? Not being separated from them at all for 10 seconds. And just for a week. Now, we're not talking the whole rest of your life. Yeah? What's going to happen? You're with that same person. Day in, day out. Yeah? Is that going to bring you ultimate happiness? Yeah? Or you have sex and you keep having sex, and you have sex for 24 hours, 7 days a week, for a whole week. Yeah? Is that going to bring you happiness? You're going to be exhausted. You know, after a while, you're going to say, leave me alone. Yeah, I want to go to sleep. Yeah, get out of here. It's true, isn't it? You know? And so we can very easily see that the things, you know, that's why I don't like to just stick with the simple examples, because sometimes that doesn't penetrate our understanding enough, you know? Yeah, do you want to be with your parents 24/7? Do you want to be with your child 24/7 for a week? You know? Yeah, after a day and a half and you weren't even with her 24/7, she said, Mom, you're driving me crazy.
I was being good.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So look what you get when you're being good. Imagine. Yeah. So, you know, none of that is really going to do it. And yet we spend our whole life chasing it. Yeah, our whole life chasing it. We have the potential to develop impartial love and compassion for every single sentient being. And what do? We narrow the field to, like, I'm happy when I'm with 1 or 2 or 3 sentient beings. And that's it. Yeah. And the rest are kind of like furniture in the room. And then the third kind of dukkha, just being under the influence of afflictions and karma, not having a choice. We feel, but I have a choice. At breakfast, I could choose toast or granola. I live in a free country. Yeah. I have freedom. I can drive down the road whatever I want. I can run down country lane and get out of here whenever I want. I'm free. Yeah. Can you prevent your body from aging? Yeah. Can you keep your mind focused on the breath, you know, for more than 10, 20 seconds? Yeah. How free are we? Hmm? So, you know, we have to really think deeply what our samsaric situation is, and then want ourselves to be free of it, and then look around and see this is what everybody else is going through. And that really changes how we feel about other people. Yeah. We may not like certain politicians or certain CEOs or whatever, but when we look and see that they're stuck in this same way as we are, it's like, how can you hate them? Yeah. Because in some way, they're going to have even greater suffering, because the higher you are in samsara, at death time, the more you freak out and go kerplunk. Yeah, great. Death is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you die in starched hospital sheets or if you die in the gutter. It really doesn't matter. Yeah. So just facing the loss of everything that you've spent your time creating, including your body, including your reputation, all of this goes bye-bye, then, there's going to be great suffering for those people, who are rich and famous and powerful. I'm talking about worldly people here. Yeah. So, to understand that and really be clear on what our refuge is and where we're going spiritually, what we want to do. And having that clarity already, I think, brings an incredible sense of peace in our mind. I don't know about you, but before I met the Dharma, I had intense confusion in my life, because I kept wondering, what's the purpose of my life? I don't want to relive my parents' life and just, do a duplicate of their life. But what's the meaning, Yeah, you get an education, you get a job, you have 2.5 kids. And actually, you only have 2.0 kids now because of overpopulation. And, and then you make some money and you spend some money and then you die. And for what purpose? Yeah. So that brought a lot of existential angst, And then for me personally, I was just asking other people, going to the religious leaders I could find in the not very diverse community I grew up in, and there was no clear sense of any real long-term purpose. I knew it must have something to do with benefiting others, but I had no idea why. So that's why I became a teacher. But, I could easily see you help the kids in the classroom for 1 year. But, how much is that really going to help the world? So, once I encountered the Buddha Dharma and heard that worldview, it was like, and started thinking about it, it made so much sense. It was something logical and reasonable, and it explained the world around me. Hearing that this is God's will, that did not explain anything to me. It just made me more confused. Yeah. Because you're supposed to follow God's will, but you're looking at what God's will is, and it's war and famine, and it's like, huh? I'm sure, it just didn't make sense. So I think knowing what we believe in, having a refuge, and something that we've really examined closely and used reasoning with and tried out in our life and found that it helps. Then already that brings such it helps our mind settle down already. Right before I met the Dharma, I was exploring different things. You go to, because I grew up in the 60s and early 70s, so it was all there. And in Los Angeles, of all places, the center of, California is the center of all the new everything. And it was all there. And, foot massage was great, but that didn't do it. Went to some group where people were having experiences of the divine and everybody was falling back. Somebody would catch you. No, no, you know, that didn't cut it. And, uh, you know, going to the temple, you know, what the rabbi said just didn't help at all. I had a Catholic boyfriend and went to see his priest. That didn't help at all. You know, so just having some clarity about what we believe in and what direction we're going in, I think is already brings some degree of peace and happiness in our lives, doesn't it? So that's why having very clear, strong refuge is important. You know, so you're not going to, you know, do crystals on Monday night and Sufi dancing on Tuesday night and shamanism on Wednesday night and Kabbalah on Thursday night and you know, what else is there? You know, Jim Jones on Friday night. Maybe you come back alive from that, maybe you don't, you know. And then bachelorism on Saturday night. That's well, uh, you know Stephen Batchelor, yeah. Well, you know he's he used to be a monk at Tarpachilling many years ago, and now he's one of these people who talk about secular Buddhism, okay, where you don't believe in rebirth. Yeah. So yeah, I disagree with Stephen and those kinds. So my feeling is he should just call it bachelorism. It's because it's not Buddhism. Yeah. So yeah, you do that on Saturday night. Sunday night, what do you do? Oh yeah, yeah. You watch the football game or the soccer game, you know, and then you start all over on Monday, and you know your mind's totally confused because you don't know what you're believing and what you should practice, and yeah, what the meaning of the whole thing is. Okay, so we're going to do the verse here on refuge, and this is you know what you think, especially in the ordination ceremony. You know, you want to be very clear about you know, our teacher is the Buddha. Okay, you're on.
Take refuge in the great world honored ones who are able to cross over the sufferings of existence in the three realms. May all sentient beings entirely enter the bliss of nirvana.
Okay. That melody is quite common in the Chinese tradition. We fudged it a little bit, but it's quite beautiful. Want to do it again?
Take refuge in the great world honored ones who are able to cross over the sufferings of existence in the three realms. May all sentient beings entirely enter the bliss of nirvana.
So that's what the assembly is chanting when the candidate is making prostrations. Then the candidate comes back, and then here you have the process of shaving. Actually, your head has been shaved before, but you leave one tuft in the center and then 4 tufts around. Okay, and so you finish shaving the head when all of that is happening, and then giving the robes. Okay, so Rabjung is the 5 precepts, which comes in a couple of pages, plus, and this is in the Tibetan system, the 5 precepts plus the 3, what you call them, 3, basic commitments, 3 somethings, huh? Changes. Okay, so they are to wear your robes, or it's to take on the signs of an ordained person, so shaving the head, wearing robes, giving up the signs of a lay person, so lay clothes and long hair, and then following the instructions of your preceptor. Okay? So in the Tibetan system, that's called Rabjung, and you're not yet a monk or a nun, but you are given permission to wear the robes, even though you don't have monastic precepts yet. Okay, the Rabjung is a step going towards monastic ordination, and so some people, like in the Tibetan monasteries, when the little kids go in, then this is what they take: the 5 precepts, and then the 3 changes, 3 somethings, 3 factors. Yeah, when in doubt, you say factor. Either factor or aspect. Yeah, when you don't know the right word, either one of those 2 words will work. Okay. So that's what's happening now. And here, I don't know if the Chinese give just Rabjung and stop with that. I haven't heard of anything like that. Have you? Yeah, do they do that? Yeah? Also in Vietnam? Okay. And then, when the person's older, or when they feel more ready to take the monastic ordination, then they come back and they do the shramaneri ordination. Okay. Here at the Abbey, we go straight through, because most people have, everybody has lived here for some time with the 5 precepts and then with the 8 precepts. Okay, so again, the Acharya is giving instructions, and the Acharya says, the reason for shaving the head is to eliminate arrogance and conceit. Okay, so that's hitting us, isn't it? So arrogance and conceit starts out with our appearance. We want to look good. So like I was talking the other day, and especially in the West, you want to look good, because the idea is if you're physically attractive, people will be your friends and be attracted to you. So you want to have a nice shaped body, you want to wear the appropriate clothes, that whatever the style is at that time, and we fuss about our hair endlessly. Men and women. Okay. And so we get arrogant about that, don't we? I'm young and attractive. Look at me. And very easy to get arrogant about that. And I remember when I was young, hearing that young people were arrogant about their physical appearance. And I thought, no, I'm not arrogant about my physical appearance. And now, looking back on it, I was, because I'm definitely not arrogant about my physical appearance now. And so there's a change in the mind. And the letting go of that kind of subtle thing of, well, I'm young and I can do this, So some people it's more about the youth, some people it's more about the physical appearance, but, as somebody old said, everybody who's young is attractive. When you're young, you don't think that. You think everybody else is attractive, but not me. Okay? So this is how we're taught, again, in our culture, isn't it? We're given this image of what being physically attractive is in the magazines, and who looks like that? Not even the models, because all the photos have been altered. Yeah. So we're all trying to look like none of us look. Yeah. We glorify youth when all of us are getting old. And when you get old, you get uglier. Yeah. But when you're young, you think, yeah, I'll get old, but not really. It won't really happen to me. Just like, yes, death will come, but I'll find a way out of it. Yeah. So there's a certain kind of arrogance that we can have. Or even if you're older, here I think it happens much more with men than with women, because older men in society are, what's the word? If you're an older man wearing a suit, you're distinguished. Yeah. Older women are not distinguished. Yeah. Are you? Like, forget it. Yeah. So, but older men are distinguished. They have their suit and their tie, their gray hair, and, they've achieved something. They have something. So they're distinguished, The women are like, over the hill and go bake some cookies. That's what you're useful for, That's why you look at Nancy Pelosi, and she's quite incredible. And Dianne Feinstein, and, these women are Hillary. So, so, there can be a certain degree of pride in how I look. I'm distinguished. I look successful. I'm physically attractive. Yeah. And so you put on these clothes, you shave your head, and it goes away, doesn't it? These clothes do not show off your good physique. Yeah, they make you look fat. Yeah. So it's good. You too need to look fatter. Yeah, you need to eat more. Yeah, but the robes in general, they don't make us look very attractive, do they? Yeah. And then you shave your head, and then, people see all the things on your head and how unevenly your hair grows and the different, your different cranial plates and how they don't fit together exactly. And, your head is flattened back and, bulges on one side. And everybody sees it now. Yeah? So, yes. Um, yeah. So you have to give up that kind of arrogance, because really, if you're going to be attractive, it's going to be because of, some internal development here. Okay, so the reason for shaving the head is to eliminate arrogance and conceit. The reason for wearing unattractive monastic clothes is to eliminate clinging and attachment. Okay, so clinging and attachment to how we look, if we're warm enough, if we're cool enough. Yeah. In the Tibetan tradition, you're always supposed to have this arm bare. Yeah, and His Holiness gives, he used to, he doesn't now, but he used to give teachings right after Losar, which was in February or March. Really cold in Dharamsala, yeah, and everybody sat outside, and you were sitting outside with your right arm exposed, you know, because you weren't allowed to wear sleeves. And I remember His Holiness kicking some people out, a couple of monks having sleeves, and His Holiness asked them to leave. Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very strict. Now people are wearing jackets in their own bedrooms and, things like that. But when I was there, even in your own bedroom, you didn't wear a jacket. Yeah. So, and you can't put your arm like that. You can't put your robe like that. In front of a teacher, you never wear your robes like this. It's considered really disrespectful. Okay? So you always have to have this arm out. So there's ways to cheat with having this arm out. You start out when it's a little bit cold, you pull this here. Okay. When it gets really cold, you go like this. Okay, can you see? But at least your arm is out now. Okay? And again, with your teachers, not supposed to wear scarves or hats, during teachings. It's quite interesting, because the Theravadas, we usually see as the most strict, they wear scarves and hats and sleeves, And the Tibetans, who make exceptions for so many things, are very strict about, your arm being out and not a scarf in it. But they'll wear these big capes, So you can't wear sleeves, but you can wear this big heavy cape that has no sleeves. Yeah? That is really heavy. You can't walk around. Jackets are so much more practical. But, that's what you do. You have your big heavy cape. And Vinaya says don't wear leather. Yeah, but in old Tibet, and now too, many people have leather shoes. That is not something that we're supposed to do. Okay, that was your modeling lesson for the day. While we're talking about robes, we cheat here at the Abbey, okay? Because your robes are supposed to, when we ordain, they fold. There's a specific pattern of folding them, okay? So there's supposed to be 2 pleats behind. We usually just put 1 pleat, but those are the Dukkha and the origin of Dukkha. And then on your left side, there's 2 pleats in front, which are true path and true cessation. Okay, so you have the 4 noble truths, and then you have another pleat on this side, and so that's so then it's wisdom and compassion together. Yeah, and then these are the fangs of the Lord of Death, to remind you of that. Mm-hmm. So, and the blue cord is in remembrance of the kindness of the Chinese monks who helped restore the monastic ordination in the 9th century, I think, or late 9th century, after it had been decimated in central Tibet. So there was an ordination in eastern Tibet, and 2 or 3 Chinese monks joined him. So the blue cord is in remembrance of their kindness. Okay. So what we often do is we stitch our pleats in, because it's and put an elastic band in there, okay? Because otherwise it's sometimes very difficult to keep the robes on because there's so many pleats and so much material gathered around your waist. So we, kind of do that, but we cover it up so it's still, the lower parts are all folded exactly the way they should be, but we just have the elastic band instead of the belt, okay? And then also, usually the donka is more like a vest, so you put it here and here, yeah, and it has quite big armholes. For women, that doesn't work so well. So we've stitched it up in front and then made the armholes smaller. Okay, but that's okay. Lama Yeshe actually wanted to change the whole design of the robes to start with. I remember in the early years he had people kind of redesigning robes. Somebody came in wearing some blue kind of thing because he thought that fit in better with the West. Where the Catholics will wear long robes. Yeah. So that kind of design, he thought that would fit in better in the West than the Tibetan robes. But that part never really took off. Okay. So the reason for shaving the head is to eliminate arrogance and conceit. The reason for wearing unattractive monastic clothing is to eliminate clinging and attachment. Okay, then the Acharya continues, before long, you will have the comportment and appearance no different from those of the virtuous ones and the sages of the three vehicles. Feel happy and rejoice for yourself. Okay, so again, look at the encouragement we're getting from the Acharya. The Acharya is saying you're putting on the outer things, but before long, if you practice well, you will have the comportment and the appearance and the inner mental state of the sages. Okay? And so feel happy because you can take your life in that direction and you can develop those qualities and rejoice at your own virtue. Yeah. So it's very important that we rejoice at our own virtue. Yeah. Somehow we feel guilty if we rejoice at our own virtue, don't we? Yeah. Like if I do something good, something's wrong with me. Yeah, I'm not worthy of doing something good. And then we cover it up by being arrogant. Yeah, because if you watch carefully, the people who are the most arrogant are often the people who feel the lousiest about themselves. Yeah, and they cover it up with the arrogance. So, and we kind of feel, I'm not as good as these other people. How can I rejoice at my own merit? My own merit is so small. Yes, I know they told me I accumulated a lot of merit from previous events, but somehow my rebirth's an accident. It's not really due to good karma. We again, it's this whole thing of putting ourselves down. And here it is. We're told, before long you'll have the comportment and appearance no different from that of the virtuous ones and sages of the three vehicles. Feel happy. Yeah, and rejoice for yourself. So somehow we feel, and this goes for compassion too, we feel that, or we think, there's this hidden assumption that if we feel happy, something is wrong. Okay? And especially if we're trying to be compassionate, if we feel happy, then we can't possibly be compassionate at the same time. Okay? So we associate compassion with self-sacrifice and being miserable because of self-sacrifice. So unless you are suffering, you are not really compassionate. Okay? This is, in my humble opinion, a result of Christianity. Yeah. Unless you are hanging on that cross, suffering and dead, you are not really compassionate. Yeah. So I didn't grow up Christian. I grew up Jewish, and I would go into churches, Catholic churches. The Protestant ones don't have Jesus on the cross; they just have the cross. And I'd look and I'd go, why are they worshiping a dead man on a cross? That's what it looked to me like. Yeah? Why are they worshiping a dead man who's suffering? So, we're little kids. Maybe by the time you get confirmed in the church, you've learned another understanding of that. But maybe your first understanding as a little kid was what I thought. And it looks kind of scary. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it looks kind of scary. And then you're told that's the epitome of compassion. And compassion's a good quality. And so then we think, if I'm happy in any way, I can't possibly be compassionate. Yeah? Whereas in Buddhism, it's totally different. Okay? So I'm not saying that this is what Christianity teaches. I have no idea. I didn't study that. I'm just saying this is the impression that you get when you're little. And those impressions when we're little can be very, very strong in our mind. Okay? But, they did say Jesus died for you on the cross. Yeah, and there you are, somebody's suffering for you to save you, but you didn't ask that person to suffer, and you don't want them to suffer, but you don't have a choice in the matter because it's already done and over and they're suffering. Yeah. So it can give us this feeling of, I don't deserve to be happy. Yeah. And I can't rejoice in my own virtue. Hold on a second. In Buddhism, it's totally the opposite. Yeah. Bodhisattvas are happy. Yeah. When you look at all the paintings of bodhisattvas, when you look at your teachers, are your teachers walking around like, are they like that? Yeah. No, they're happy people. And they're happy not because they're selfish. They're happy because they aren't selfish. Okay? So being compassionate and being happy go together. They're not happy as in, oh, giddy, this is so fantastic and I got my lollipop. Not that kind of happiness, but there's an inner joy and an inner peace that comes from spiritual practice that they have. Okay? And so it's fair to rejoice at our own merit. We have to rejoice at it. Yeah. What, we're going to rejoice at everybody else's merit, but again, I'm so special, I can't rejoice at my own? Yeah, it's another form of self-centeredness, isn't it? Everybody else has merit worth rejoicing at, but not me. Yeah? Okay? So of course we have to rejoice at our own merit, rejoice at our own opportunity. Yeah. We don't get proud about these things, but we rejoice and we use our opportunity and we use our merit to have compassion for others and to reach out and do what we can to be of benefit and service. And we do it with a happy mind instead of, oh, I am sacrificing for you. I am suffering so much out of my compassion for you, you slob. Yeah, that's how we can often feel, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sacrificing my own happiness for others, and I hope they notice. We bring so much of the Judaic-Christian stuff into Buddhism unnecessarily. I talked with one Theravada monk once. It was a younger monk. He hadn't been ordained very long, but he was telling me that he just felt terrible because he couldn't keep his precepts very well. He couldn't keep his precepts perfectly, with every little detail perfectly, and he just felt terrible. And I was saying, look, the reason we take precepts is because we can't keep them perfectly. The Buddha understands that. That's why we do confession. That's why we do posada, and we confess and we restore our precepts, And I said, when you're trying and doing your best, the Buddha is happy and the Buddhas are smiling at you because you're really trying. You don't have to be perfect. And he said, but I picture Buddha looking at me kind of with a dirty look, like horrible monk who can't keep your precepts well. And my heart just went out to this guy. He couldn't touch the Buddha's compassion. He just saw the Buddha judging him. And where did that come from? Yeah, what he learned some time ago, as a kid in our culture. Yeah, and it pervades our culture. It doesn't really matter whether you went to church or not. Maybe you got an extra dose of it at church. But the whole thing pervades the entire culture. Yeah. And it's like in Buddhism, it's not like that. Yeah, the Buddhas look on us with kindness. They aren't wrathful. They aren't vengeful. Okay? And we're supposed to be happy about our own merit. And it's not just always walk around like, oh, I'm a sinner. Mea culpa. I think it's culpa mea. But people tell me it was mea culpa. Anyway, it's one of them. And best breeding. I'm so lousy. I'm a sinner. And you think that the more you do that, the more you put on that thing of how unworthy you are, that the more blessings you're going to get. Okay? So in Buddhism, yes, we value humility. Humility is very important for a spiritual practitioner. Yeah. But sitting there and putting yourself down, that's not humility. Okay? It's just another form of self-centeredness. If I can't be the best, I'm going to be the worst. And I'm worse than everybody else. And that's how I'm distinguished. Yeah? It's just more self-centeredness. So we have to put that down. Okay. So then, the Acharya shaves off the 4 little tufts, and while that is going on, then we chant the verse of going forth, which is guard integrity and aspiration, cut the bonds of family and kin, leave your worldly home to practice the Dharma, aspire to lead all beings to full awakening. So it's actually time to stop. So I'll explain that verse and we'll chant that verse next time. Okay. there's a few minutes for questions. And you had a comment. Yeah.
I wanted to confirm your impression of what happens when you're a little child and you see Jesus hanging on the cross. At least for me, it was very frightening. It was disturbing, quite morbid. You know, as I grew up, I said, why are we doing this? This is not good for the mind. But that's where I think the guilt comes from. Because you are such a lousy piece of garbage that God had to sacrifice his son for you. Look how terrible you are. You caused this. Is basically the impression that or the message that I got.
Yeah.
And so, the other day I was like, why am I feeling guilty that I feel happy? Why do I assume that I should feel lousy all the time when other people because other people are feeling lousy? It's like, I don't have a right. So I think this definitely comes from that Christian worldview, and it's just, it's pervasive. I think it's not just for Christian or for religious people in this culture. It's everywhere. And then I also had a problem believing that bodhisattvas could still be compassionate if they didn't hurt in response to others' pain. I'm like, what is motivating them to reach out? You know, if they're not taking on the suffering of others and feeling that as if it were their own, they're actually hurting. Why would they be motivated to do that? But I see now it comes from this Christian idea of what is compassion. Compassion always involves this agony, this suffering, and that kind of thing. There's no joy.
Yeah. In Buddhism, they say that bodhisattvas find others' suffering unbearable, but the way they find it unbearable isn't in the, I caused them to suffer, I'm to blame, I'm guilty for feeling happy. It's not that feeling of unbearableness. It's because the bodhisattvas realize that that kind of suffering and dukkha is due to ignorance, and it's something that can be ameliorated. So it's not a given, it's something that doesn't have to be. So they find other living beings' misery unbearable. They want, in the sense that they want to do something about it, but they don't go into self-distress in terms of, I feel depressed because they're unhappy, and I'm unworthy of feeling happy because they're unhappy, and I caused them to be unhappy, or whatever it is. Yeah. So they we do read that bodhisattvas find sentient beings' misery unbearable, but it's unbearable in the sense that they use that to really practice well. It's not unbearable in the sense of, I can't stand to see them suffer. Euthanize that dog. I can't stand to see the dog suffer. That's not what bodhisattvas experience.
So one of the things that come to mind as we're having this discussion and talking about the image of Jesus on the cross and what that message conveys, and the image that came to my mind around that is remembering the Vietnamese monks who self-immolated during the Vietnam conflict, and then also in Tibet, the example of many, both monks and nuns, who have done that since, also to protest and the conditions there. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that happens in the Buddhist context and what exactly are the issues there.
Okay. So, first of all, I think if you're going to do that, you have to really have attained path of seeing. Yeah. Or at very most, the path of, very least, the path of preparation. Because you're not allowed to sacrifice your body unless you have the realizations to be able to control your rebirth. Yeah. So first of all, that. And you looked at some of the Vietnamese monks, and I mean, they were in samadhi when all this was going on. So they had some realizations. I was in Dharamsala when the very first, during His Holiness's teachings, when I think the very first Tibetan man self-immolated in Delhi. And it was a difficult situation for His Holiness because he couldn't say what that person did was useless because everybody else was, feeling so much pain from what that monk, he was a layman, from what that lay person did. On the other hand, His Holiness wasn't in favor of it, and he said it's better to live for Tibet rather than die for Tibet. Yeah, so I think that's very much the Buddhist position. Live for what you can do, especially if you're below path of seeing. Live for what you can do instead of die for what you can do. If death comes, then of course make it meaningful in some way or another. You can't control that. But, in Buddhism, suicide in any way is not a virtuous action. Nor is euthanasia. But it's a hard thing to say out loud because people see how much these people have suffered and how deeply they feel about their cause, and so you don't want to criticize them. Yeah. Because I don't know about you, I don't have the courage to do that. So I don't want to criticize what that person did. But on the other hand, I think there's other ways to be useful for whatever political or social causes we believe in.
The cross, and I was just wondering, maybe it could represent for the message could be something like from Buddhist point of view, like that
The wheel of life.
to saying like nothing in samsara works, go beyond or something like that.
Yeah, it's possible someone could understand it like that. Okay, let's dedicate.